And we all know that person or people that just from outward appearances are more successful than we are. But we know for a fact that they are just not smarter than we are. So what gives?
Yeah.
If you're on the latest and greatest Trek, or pick your favorite brand of racing bicycle, and you take Lance Armstrong, who's obviously one of the best cyclists around, and put him on your 3-year-old's tricycle, you're gonna beat him.
Yeah.
No matter, just even though it's Lance Armstrong. So it's the better bike analogy. They just might have a better bike.
Yeah.
Because they've got the processes in place, they're executing on the processes, and the processes are simple, meaning they're repeatable, which means we can scale.
Hey everybody, I'm Brian Erickson, and welcome to the Cincinnati Business Podcast, hosted by the Cincinnati Podcast Studio. Today, I'm joined by my good friend, Jim.diebold. He is a business coach from Focal Point Business Coaching, and we're going to talk a little bit today about what it means to be a business coach, why someone might need something like this, and also just a little bit of the pitfalls he's been seeing with some people along the way. But before we get into all of that, I just kind of want to know a little bit more about you. Like, what brought you, your path to the whole world of business coaching?
Yeah, well, that's a little bit of a journey, as it is for many.
Yeah.
So my wife and I are actually from St. Louis, born and raised, and my career kicked off with an organization called Busman Fuse Company. So I'm actually an electrical engineer by degree, but I've never engineered anything, just to be clear. My degree certainly got me my first role, but transferring out here in a sales capacity back in 99. So we've been here for quite some time.
You can call yourself a native now.
I can call myself a native now.
Yeah.
Is it okay?
Yeah, I
don't
think it's
root
okay.
for the Reds though. I still root for the Cardinals. Is that okay?
We're going to have to forgive you for that one.
So coming out here in 99 in a sales capacity and working a fairly small territory here, Cooper Industries is a huge organization, or was. They've been acquired since, but I moved into their lighting division, which is where I became a regional manager, and then had a very expansive territory at that point. It's from there, after 6 years of doing that, where I was able to transition into one of their independent agents, which is kind of like a broker, if you will.
Okay.
Where I became a business owner then. A partner and I had the agency down here in Southwest Ohio for about 5 years.
Okay.
Where I tell people that's where I had left my cushy corporate job and then started working 50 plus hours a week, chasing down hospital projects and school projects and remodels and retrofits and all that kind of stuff. It was the evolution or the dawn of LED upgrades to everything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
needless to say, there was a lot going on, but working all those hours just was not favorable for the family life.
Yeah.
And we closed the company down, didn't want to continue, quite honestly. And there was a lot of great things, honestly, that came from that. And I went on this, I'll call it journey. I think if I were sitting with a psychologist right now, they would tell me it was a legitimate midlife crisis. But I spent about 18 months trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And I ran into a franchise broker where I started looking at a couple different opportunities, Focal Point being one of them. And it just resonated the most because I thought back to my partner and I and the challenges that we had. And it just made a lot of sense. And the core values of the company are really important to me, as well as doing something that is really meaningful. It makes a difference to the people that I serve now. I mean, don't get me wrong, selling light fixtures is great and necessary.
Well, it's funny because you haven't lost that, because you walk in here and all of a sudden you start looking at all our lights we had in here too.
Absolutely.
It's so funny.
It is. It still catches my eye. My wife kind of elbows me from time to time as well when we're in buildings, but I guess old habits die hard.
They do.
But really serving people in a way that's going to make a bigger impact for them. Because I can only imagine what it would have been like for me had I gone from the 50-ish hours down to a regular 40-hour week, right? And the impact that would have made. So being able to do that for almost 5 years now, most gratifying and rewarding and humbling experience that I've ever had.
Wow, that's cool. Now, one of the things you and I were talking about before we got on camera was it's interesting because every single business coach feels like they come from a different area of expertise as they do it. And one of the things that you were talking about is that you come from sales mostly.
Yep.
That was like your big background before you left your cushy corporate job.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really interesting how that is a strength of yours. How have you seen it like help the businesses that you've been coaching?
Well, let's be honest, everybody, there's no business if there's no sales, right? And what's interesting is this is my own observation, by the way.
Yeah.
But I feel that organizations believe that if you have sales in your title, you're some kind of super person. Like you don't necessarily need support beyond the, hey, what's going on this week or this month? And, do we need manufacturing to step it up or do we need whatever? But no actual like legit sales support, continued training, things like that. I honestly do see organizations where they just say, you're an outgoing person, you've done well in sales before, here's what we do, have at it. And what's interesting is statistically, most organizations admit to, by most, I mean 60-ish% admit to not being great at sales training. And a very large number, 72 or so % of salespeople admit to being self-taught.
Yeah.
So that says a lot.
Yeah.
It says a lot. And so when sales managers or VPs of sales are frustrated, my question would be, what kind of training do you provide? Ongoing training, not just once and then expect it to stick. Because another stat is 83% of salespeople admit that they forget whatever training they've had within 3 months.
No, that doesn't feel surprising.
No, and I apologize. I can't cite the sources that I got that information from. I did a little writing for a collaborative book. I did a chapter in a collaborative book, and I looked all that stuff up. I just don't remember the exact sources, but it was staggering to read that. But honestly, that was my experience. When I moved from my application engineering role into my sales role, there was all the new salespeople came into corporate for sales training. And it was a while ago. So it was on these things called VHS tapes. You guys remember what those were?
I think I remember what those are.
So it was like 2 or 2.5 days. There was some role play and stuff like that, which, not knowing any better, even looking back on it now, I would say it was decent, but that was it. Then, 20 years of no other like specific targeted training or support in that way to help me, or really, as far as I know, anyone else get better at what they were doing. So that's been a big realization of mine, that there are a lot of assumptions that are made that salespeople are just great salespeople and they don't need ongoing training and ongoing support to be better.
Do you think that's why there are so many bad salespeople out there?
Probably.
Yeah.
And really, honestly, it just comes down to training. I was sharing with you earlier that, honestly, the best sales training I've had was at Focal Point because they taught consultative selling. And when I think back to my career, not knowing any better, I would just walk in and ask people, hey, what's going on? Like, what do you need today?
Yeah. And
they'd be like, nothing. And I would go, okay, see ya. And I would just leave, right? And that was always, I didn't know any different. So, and I didn't have to develop a need for light fixtures, right? Like everybody buys them.
Yeah, that's an easy one. Yeah, it's selling something everyone needs.
So I would just rely on my personality and develop relationships and take people golfing and happy hour and down to corporate for training and develop relationships that way. I didn't have to develop need or demonstrate. I shouldn't say develop, but like demonstrate the value behind something like coaching, for example. It's a totally different sales approach. I learned all that at Focal Point.
Interesting. Because one of the things I feel like I've seen so often, and I think you are in a way a survivor of it, is this like idea that people try and hire salespeople, expect them to come in and already know the whole market, know all the people that they need to make the sales to, and then they're just okay. Like, okay, see ya, have fun. Like, especially because I think it's a classic mistake business owners make, where they feel like, oh, I just got to hire the sales guy and they'll just magically do everything. Like,
correct.
Like you said, superpowers.
They do. Yes. So to that point, I guess I kind of alluded to it a minute ago where, okay, you're coming from some other organization. This is our product or products, or this is our service or services. Here's what they are. Mm-hmm. Be free. Mm-hmm. With little to no conversation about what is our sales process, who are our ideal clients, who are our competitors, and how are we better than they are. I'm not saying it doesn't happen at all.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that I've seen it not be as in-depth as it could be to truly support them in their efforts. Because look, I've seen some like customers in the pipeline, so to speak, and they're not ideal clients. And the one thing that is guaranteed to happen when a salesperson is not hitting their numbers, well, two things are guaranteed to happen. Number one, they're going to overinflate their opportunities in the pipeline to make it look like they've had some stuff coming.
Yep.
Okay. Because there's fear that they're not getting where they need to be.
Yeah.
From a sales revenue perspective. Mm-hmm. And then so they start doing more things, thinking that doing more is going to equal more opportunities, when in fact the reverse is happening. They're getting fewer opportunities because they're not focused in the right places. So the question is, does the organization truly have a targeted ideal customer, like avatar, that they're going after? And if that person just stays the course, they'll eventually break through.
Yeah.
Like maybe there's just a tweak that needs to happen in the presentation or how they're doing it or whatever the case may be. But yeah, when salespeople aren't hitting numbers,
I mean, the whole company suffers.
Well, the whole company does suffer, but the individual is going to, like I said, kind of overinflate things.
Yeah.
And some of that is quite honestly also a byproduct of not having the right training.
Yeah.
Or right sales process support.
Or even the right ability to have check-ins with leadership. Just kind of expect that they're off doing their thing.
Yeah, beyond what's your pipeline look like? Okay, great. Next, what's your pipeline look like? When's it going to close?
Yeah.
Right? Those kind of traditional questions that managers tend to ask.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, the funny thing about business owners, especially when they're small businesses, they're everything.
They're everything.
They are absolutely everything.
They need good chiropractors because they're wearing a lot of hats.
They are. And their backs are hurting because they're carrying everything.
Yep.
And the thing I think that I'm curious about is if you are like, when you're having conversations with these business owners and they are specifically struggling in the space of sales, since that was kind of your background, what you've learned a lot about, what is kind of the big thing that you've tried to help them understand when they are facing like when you and I first talked, when we first were having the conversation around like, hey, I don't know if my business is going to thrive if I don't hit X goal in 90 days. What do you normally say to somebody who's in that situation, and it's specifically because they just can't get customers in the door?
Yeah, so what's interesting about that is what's really a slight related tangent here for a second. What's great about Focal Point is this library of content that we have to share with business owners. Mm-hmm. And we have things broken up into different modules, and sales is actually the 3rd/4th module.
I remember, yeah.
Everybody wants to jump to sales because, as we said earlier, no sales, no lights on, right? No business. But the foundation to sales is a whole bunch of other things that if they're not being done well, then you're building a house of cards that's easy to collapse at any point in time. Mm-hmm. So earlier, we're just talking about, do you have an ideal client avatar, and are you going after them? How are you going after them? What do you know about your competitors? How do you stack up against them? Not so much, I should say both. How are you absolutely better than they are, and how are they absolutely better than you are? Mm-hmm. And how do you leverage your strengths in your marketing? Mm-hmm. And so all of those things are foundational components. What are the metrics we're measuring our team to other than, did you sell 6 things today?
Yeah.
Right? Like, how do we get there?
Yeah.
As opposed to, did you do it? Those foundational components often are missed. Mm-hmm. They're implied, but they're not intentional because nothing's written down anywhere, usually. Yeah. And so it's this mental struggle that most owners will say, well, it's all perfectly clear in my mind. I'm like, okay, that was the important
what about your
part.
Employees?
Your mind. What about what about everybody else? And how well do you lay that out to the team? And honestly, it's not for a lack of intelligence. All of these owners are massively smart, right? Yeah. Whether it's a schooling knowledge or specific skill because they've done it for a while and then they decided to open their own business.
Yeah.
But to your point, they get so bogged down by having to do everything or feeling like they have to do everything because of trusting their team.
Mm-hmm.
All of these dynamics play into them not necessarily creating the foundational things that are needed to build on to have that success in sales or leadership, their own time, all of that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an interesting thing that you're kind of bringing up there is when you're dealing with kind of this building of a business, you're often running into this thing where like anyone can just start a business.
Sure.
And there's no real like, this is the way you have to do it every single time.
Yep.
But that means that you're carrying a lot, like we said, lots of hats. But then they get to a point where they can't move any further. And
Correct.
It's because their fundamentals don't exist the way that they're supposed to yet.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really an interesting thing when we talk about like, why would somebody need a business coach? Is because a lot of the times we don't know what we don't know.
Correct.
Like, what is that? There was something you told me a while back, and I'm trying to remember what it was, but it was something about like looking at that business owner down the street who's succeeding, but he doesn't seem any smarter than you.
Yeah.
Like, what is that? Can you remind me?
Yeah. Let me see if I can do it here off the cuff. But it was kind of a commercial I was doing one day in our B&I meeting where I was saying, if we were going to use the analogy that your business is like a bike, all businesses are just like bikes. And we all know that person or people that just from outward appearances are more successful than we are. But we know for a fact that they are just not smarter than we are. So what gives?
Yeah.
And then I, after that pause, go to the analogy of bike riders. Like if you're on the latest and greatest Trek or pick your favorite brand of racing bicycle, and you take Lance Armstrong, who's obviously one of the best cyclists around, and put him on your 3-year-old's tricycle, you're going to beat him.
Yeah.
No matter, just even though it's Lance Armstrong. So it's the better bike analogy. They just might have a better bike.
Yeah.
Because they've got the processes in place, they're executing on the processes, and the processes are simple, meaning they're repeatable, which means we can scale.
I love that. And I think the other thing that you tagged on there that was always so impactful for me, like, first off, the analogy of Lance Armstrong on a tricycle is a hilarious picture. Yeah. Yellow bracelet and all. Hilarious. But I think the other thing that you were kind of saying to us because you took me and a bunch of other business owners through like kind of a 90-day kind of starter group coaching thing. Yep. And I absolutely loved it. And the thing that stuck out the most to me was you said, business itself is actually fairly simple, but it's just trying to outlast everybody else.
Yeah.
And it's about doing the same simple things over and over and over again until eventually you find a way to succeed.
The business itself is exciting, but the keys to success, I would have to admit, are fairly boring. It's just being consistent at the fundamentals. I mean, the best sports teams, fundamentals all day. Your retirement account, compound interest, boring, but super exciting at the end.
Yeah.
Right? So it's just doing the right things for your business consistently, which, by the way, tend to be the same right things across just about any business. There's just the nuances to your business that make it a little bit different. Yeah. But fundamentally, the principles are still the same, no matter the business. It's just being consistent. Consistency will win.
Yeah,
it does win every time.
I love that. And I think that's also a warning when somebody is starting their own business, that it's going to take time.
It does take time.
It takes a really long time.
If you put $1,000 in the bank, you do not have $1 million at the end of a year.
No.
It takes a while. The good news is, though, you don't have to wait 60 years to have $1 million if you start your business well.
Absolutely.
It can happen way faster.
So to switch perspectives a little bit then, so what is it that you have seen that instantly tells you that somebody needs a business coach? Like what out there kind of exists that is kind of a telltale sign for you?
One of the primary things goes back to my example of working 50 hours a week. It's the person that misses their kids' events or comes in late. Everybody knows those people. You're like, oh, there's Steve again. He's late again.
Yeah.
Right? Or they don't take vacation, or they text and email while on vacation. They send emails at 10, midnight, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning.
Guilty.
I mean, that stuff is indicative of not having things done during normal business hours. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying in every case you could or should be able to do things during normal business hours, but if there's a pattern here, then something's probably not aligned well from a process perspective. We're not trusting our team. There are variables that feed into that cause us to go, okay, something's up.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And the other thing that I love that you use since I've been to so many of the B&I meetings that you've done your little pitches at, you love using the analogy of a athlete who has a coach.
Yep.
And I'm kind of curious, like, what are you see, like, it's pretty clear what the benefits of a coach is for an athlete.
Yep.
What are the benefits for a business owner to have a coach?
Yeah, so it's actually similar. The benefits are objective, accountability, seeing the blind spots. So per that analogy, I make the, Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, Michael Phelps, right? 3 very prominent figures in sports in their day. Would they have been the athletes they were without coaches? If their whole process was reading books and listening to podcasts.
It's okay. We can rail on podcasts a little bit. I love it.
Right. Don't get me wrong. Fantastic sources of information. And I highly believe that people should pursue knowledge like that. But that's not about the knowledge. Mm-hmm. It's about what do you do with the knowledge and how do you know if you're doing it right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? You don't know. I mean, so Butch Harmon did not teach Tiger Woods how to play golf.
No.
He already knew how to play golf.
He said, how do you get your swing better?
Butch Harmon was there to watch him hit 1,000 balls a day and go, dude, you just lowered your elbow. Did you feel that? Mm-hmm. And no, I didn't feel that. Mm-hmm. When you're in the middle of the muck as a business owner, because you've got so many things going on, you can't see your blind spot. You just can't. Mm-hmm. It's not possible, no matter who you are. And so having an objective person that is willing and able to ask the tough questions, provide some insight. The objective part is really the important part, because a leadership team can be objective, but your decision affects their paycheck. Mm-hmm. A spouse can be objective, but your decision affects the household income, right? Now, don't get me wrong. I guess you could connect the logic dots and say that, I have an emotional component as well, because your decision could determine whether or not we're going to still work together.
Yeah.
But truthfully, at the end of the day, I get to be objective and be a silent partner with the business owner or a team leader. It's not always a business owner, right? It could be someone that's in a leadership role in the organization. And come alongside that person, because as they say, it's lonely at the top. Mm-hmm. Very, very, very common phrase is, I just don't have anybody to talk to.
Yeah.
Because look, at the end of the day, as much as we love our spouses, we just don't want to regurgitate the day to them. Or a business owner that's got something going on and they're stressed about, and you got to tackle that. I just get to listen.
Yeah.
And ask questions.
Yeah. And
then create a plan and then hold accountable.
Love
just
that.
Like 1,000 balls a day.
Yeah. Well, so then on top of that, then maybe this is the common issue that you're running into, but like you're talking about just needing somebody to talk to. But like, what is the biggest, or what are you seeing the biggest trend of issues right now inside of your coaching clients here in the end of 2024?
Yeah, I would say there isn't a runaway biggest one. It's really all encompassing because everything's connected. Mm. And what I'll say, to circle back to the previous question, again, all these owners are smart. It's really, having a coach has nothing to do with being smart or not being smart. Like you said, with athletes, we expect them to have coaches to be at the top of their game. Mm-hmm. And then so my question has always been, why wouldn't you want a business coach to be at the top of your game as well? Why do you keep trying to do it by yourself like I did, which got me to 50 plus hours a week?
Yeah.
That's obviously not sustainable.
No.
So, and slightly oversimplified, not having somebody to talk to, right?
Yeah.
Because there's certainly more to it than that. Getting into strategy and dealing with strategy and creating plans and working through personnel challenges and the sales piece and all of those components that go into building a successful business. But getting back to this recent question about what seems to be a trend or whatever, I can't say that I specifically have one. It really is time is always, at least in my experience, at the top of the list. They're working late at night or early in the morning because they're winding up doing their team's work during the day. And what I mean by that is there's potentially trust issues with some or all of the team. And not because the team's not good. There's a mental component as an owner where, like, this is my baby. I'm responsible. Everything's got to be perfect. And no one's going to do it as well as me.
Or at least not care as much.
Certainly not care as much. At least that's the perception.
Yeah.
Great employees absolutely care. Now, don't get me wrong. They're there to collect
a
paycheck. But when the culture is right, it's not there to collect a paycheck. It's there to exchange my skills and services for your revenue, right? Totally different mentality when you phrase it like that, right? When the culture is that I am giving of myself and you are giving of your resources. Yeah. But there's always challenges with employees. There just is. There's always challenges with clients. And there's challenges with the internal components to the organization with growth and plateau. How do we break through this plateau to get to the next level? And all of those are daunting when you're by yourself. And all of those are going to be challenging all the time. That's just the way business is. In my opinion, that's what makes it worth it in the end.
Well, speaking of worth it, I mean, you now have been through a series of roles in your career. And I know from personal experience, it's obvious that you love what you do right now.
I absolutely do.
Totally.
Most humbling and energizing and amazing thing.
Why is it energizing for you?
I literally get up every single day and help people.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my job, if you want to call it that, is I get to partner with owners and help them through their challenges. There's nothing more, and to me, nothing more energizing than being a part of that whole process for them and helping see it come to fruition and what it looks like on the other side. When not every single meeting is like, mind-blowing and revolutionary. It might just be a simple conversation that leads to a cool little tweak or something. But every once in a while, there's this tension, and then at some point in the conversation, you just see this total relaxing because something was really weighing on their mind. And as usual, when you're too close to the situation, which is true for any of us, you don't see potential solutions or anything like that. So again, getting to be objective because I'm at the 10 or 30,000 foot view.
Yeah.
And being able to, again, ask those questions and just seeing total relief.
Yeah.
Something they haven't felt in a day or days or weeks or whatever because of whatever it is that's going on. Man, that's hugely energizing. And like I said, humbling and gratifying to be a part of that.
Yeah. Well, and I can personally attest to this. I mean, I remember, I don't know, how long ago was this? 6-9 months ago now?
Yeah.
That I came.
A year ago.
Was it a year ago now?
It was a year ago.
Oh, wow. So I came to you and I basically said, I don't think I will last the next 3 months if I don't hit X targets.
You did.
And what?
You subbed in our BNI chapter.
Yeah.
We immediately sat down in the lobby.
Yeah.
And had I don't know, it was supposed to be, I think, a 15-minute conversation that turned
like
into an hour.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just asking some questions like I normally do, taking some notes, and now look at you.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It was crazy because it was, you kind of sat down and said, hey, here's what you think about over the next 90 days. And I text you, I think it was closer to 60 days. And I was like, I'm already meeting or about to exceed those targets.
Yeah.
And it was just because I had someone like yourself to just bounce these ideas off of.
It's exciting, man. I love that.
It's so
That's
cool.
what I get to do every day.
I'm kind of jealous. That sounds fun.
It is amazing. Let's be honest. You're having a lot of fun.
I do get to have a lot of fun. I get to hang out with really cool people like yourself.
I appreciate that.
I love it. Yeah. So now I want to talk a little bit more about like the Cincinnati market in general, because you also are tapped into a lot of different companies in the area. And obviously there was a whole lot of, I think, fear in the business community leading up to the presidential election, which obviously we're opposed to that now.
Yep.
What are you seeing as kind of the attitude towards the next year, the next fiscal year? What are you seeing in business owners as they're looking forward?
Yeah, I didn't specifically see a slowdown, quite honestly.
Oh, good.
And I guess I would say, logically, some organizations were more conservative about their fiscal spend and things like that based on the uncertainty of the election, which is kind of funny because I said, look, in my adult life, from a memory perspective, the same exact thing has happened the day after every single election.
100%.
Which is to say nothing.
Yeah.
Life went on. There might have been one or a dip or whatever in the stock market, which immediately corrected itself, like every single election. So, and I don't know why we do this to ourselves, but that's a whole nother topic.
There's a reason there's a fear and greed index in the market.
Yeah, I mean, so anyway, that aside, I would say that owners that are intentional about their growth and look for resources to help them be very strategic and intentional about their growth, they're always looking no matter what's happening. And there are plenty of them in the market, for example, to where because of the networking I do and the referral partners that I have, there's basically a good exchange with prospects, I would say.
Awesome. Okay.
Yep.
Well, so, because I think the thing that I'm kind of curious about is, it seemed like leading up to the election, there obviously is all this fear that happens. But the other thing that I was kind of noticing was it also seemed like people were kind of a little bit afraid of the direction that work is changing again. Like they obviously, when we went through COVID, we had this big shift to remote work, and that has changed the way that we do work a lot.
No doubt.
And then obviously now, in the midst of this kind of AI shift in the world, things are also changing. Are you seeing that people are generally more optimistic or pessimistic about some of these changes, as it seems like the world of work is shifting again?
I would say neutral to optimistic.
That's encouraging.
Yeah, neutral to optimistic. You mentioned AI. We'll use that as probably the biggest or loudest technology advance at the moment. I haven't heard anybody specifically be negative, although I don't know that you can talk to anybody where they're like, is it going to cancel out my job or what's it going to do? And I guess realistically there might be some.
Yeah.
But there are so many nuances where the human mind is still needed for discernment, actual discernment, not like computer algorithm learning discernment.
Yeah.
It's very different.
Very different.
Yes, very different. Emotions are still important in a lot of cases for very specific reasons, and computers don't have that. It's black and white. Like, I learned something and now the answer is this, and it's like...
And it's real creepy when AI tries to emulate emotion.
Yeah, very much so. But I would say still neutral to optimistic. Not every client I have can benefit, or I would at least say not benefit as much as other clients can to leverage AI. So yeah, neutral to optimistic on the different things that are going on. Look, I forget who said this, but the only thing that's constant is change, right? So you just kind of roll with the punches. And one of the things I've shared, I don't know if you saw it or not, is just life cycle of business. It's the sigmoid curve, and there's always a decline phase if you're not always learning something new, and which allows you to continue to grow. Pace of growth is relative, but if you don't try to keep learning new things, you will ultimately decline.
Yeah.
And a lot of a primary trap that a lot of business owners fall into is they fall into what we call the founder's trap, which is I got us here. Or another, it's also called the Midas trap, which is King Midas. Everything I touch turns to gold.
Yeah.
And they, unfortunately, success leads to blinders, and those blinders cause us to not stay on top of things and maybe make a tweak when we need to make a tweak, or jettison something and start something brand new because of whatever's happening in the marketplace with customers' wants and needs and things like that. Biggest thing with decline, though, we tend to not realize it until it's too late because we've been that complacent in what we've been doing. So that's another thing that I would say a coach would help focus on, is staying fresh and up to date and what's going on. And again, challenging when you're trying to do it by yourself.
So say that I'm a business owner that is in the midst of a decline and I'm aware enough to know that it's happening. How could you encourage me in this moment, like the first step to try and say, hey, what can I do next to try and stabilize my fall?
Yeah, well, we would start to dig into what happened. Did we change something internally and we missed it? Like, did our process change accidentally? Or did we make a process change that we thought was awesome, but it was kind of hidden by other things and we didn't realize that this change has actually hurt us? Did we change product lines or how we market the product line? I mean, there's multiple reasons as to why we might be in a decline phase. Did we just get complacent and we just need to reinvigorate our sales efforts and our marketing, do a refresh on our brand and whatnot? It could be as simple as that, even though there's a lot of work involved in that, but it's still fairly simple, right?
Yeah.
So we really, honestly, would just peel it back and figure out what happened. Is the entire market in a decline, or is it just us?
Yeah. That's actually a great point, because I think the majority of people are so stuck in the business, they can't work on it.
No,
and so
100%.
When they're in that decline, they need to recognize that they have to step out and actually see what is happening on a grander scale versus I just got to keep getting orders out.
That's what, quite honestly, from a strictly business perspective, one of the positives that came out of COVID, because everyone experienced a pause of some kind for some period of time. Obviously, unfortunately, some businesses wound up closing, which is terrible. But specific to what's happening inside of an organization, if sales are good, you have no idea how good your processes are. None. You just deal with frustrations because, as they say, sales forgives all sins. You just move forward and life is good. It's in scenarios, now this one obviously forced with COVID, where everyone was able, if they did, take a step back and go, why do we do it like that? But you don't see it when things are good. It's when things slow down that you go, hang on a second, like this isn't efficient at all. This is terrible.
Yeah.
And then you get a chance to revamp and reboot and whatnot. So of all the unfortunates that came from that from a business perspective is certainly a positive, where people were able to kind of reorient and figure out, how are we going to come out of this on the other side? How are we going to look better? Because we have some time right now. Let's fix some things.
Yeah. And I love how when we were in our group coaching with you, you talked about the idea of having regular rhythms of measurables that you could tell, like, hey, now you might, like, hey, did the numbers slip? Why did they slip? Exactly. And you can diagnose on a more weekly, daily, monthly rhythm. And then that way you don't have to decline so much before you understand where you need to be next.
Exactly. That's why having metrics is so important. That goes back to the foundational comment before. People want to talk about sales right away, but it's like, well, what are you measuring? If you're just measuring sales dollars, that's the lagging indicator as to what's going on. What are the leading indicators as to what's going on and what you're doing to make the numbers happen?
Yeah.
And not enough people focus on that, not intentionally. And like I said, a lot of times it's just implied. Salespeople, go make sales calls.
Yeah.
All right, well, there's probably a few more intricacies to that we should be measuring to make sure certain things are getting done, so that when we aren't hitting our numbers, we can go backwards and go, well, did you do these 5 things?
Yeah. The classic marketing perspective of that, since I'm more in the marketing space, is the equations of what ends up leading to a conversation and a sale. So like, if you think of like, if a sale is the end goal, what is upstream of that? Well, usually it's conversations that you have with people. It's how many, and generally if we're talking like digital marketing, we're talking how many impressions are we getting? How many people do we need to see this before we have a conversation and eventually have a sale?
Exactly.
And so I love how you're saying that metrics are so important, because they really are.
They are. They tell us everything.
It's a huge thing.
Which is why we need to properly leverage a good CRM system, because it gives us that data so that we know we need to talk to 10 of our ideal client to get one, or 100 of our ideal client to get one, or whatever the numbers are.
Yeah.
So again, when the numbers aren't being hit and we look at it and go, oh, you know what? I only talked to 5 people instead of 10.
And especially when companies have really long sales cycles for larger items. Yeah, because they could be like, oh, I've only talked to 5 people this week. That means in 6 months, I'm going to be down 20 grand.
Exactly.
Like, that's something that people really have to be paying attention to.
Absolutely. Instead of just pounding on numbers and going, go talk to more people. Well, it's, but maybe not. Right?
Exactly.
Maybe it's just different people.
Well, Jim, this has been fantastic. I love this. I'd love to give you just a chance to kind of pitch yourself and what you do. So do you mind giving us the short version of who you are, what you do, and how people can connect with you?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Brian. So my passion is coming alongside those business owners, as I've shared throughout this conversation, becoming that silent partner, coming alongside and helping them not only grow their business intentionally, but more importantly, while getting their time back, which is something that is doable. I know it doesn't feel like it, but it is. So I'm easy to get a hold of. Everybody has my cell phone, and they can just text me, and it's 513-444-0067. Or if you're more of a passive outreach person, you can shoot me an email. It's jdiebold, and that's DIEBOLD at focalpointcoaching.com. Sorry, jim.diebold at focalpointcoaching.com. Brian, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your show.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here and sharing all those nuggets of wisdom you've given us. This has been absolutely fantastic.
My pleasure, man.
Awesome.